like Mount Sumeru Buddha, today's topic is kind of broad, and I want to give you an outline here so you know what to expect. So we'll talk about like this rule, right? This means suchness. So we'll dive into the concept of that, and then we'll look at what Mount Sumeru really means in terms of the Dhamma, the truth. And Mount Sumeru, here according to Master Ching Kong, is the pure Dhamma body of Buddha, and that the Buddha's body is the body of enlightenment, the body of freedom, if you will. And Buddhism teaches freedom in the current life, and it's not some sort of promise of salvation after death. So that's a distinction between religion and Buddhism. And that the basis of freedom is equality. Right? We have to bring back to reality that when we study about Buddhism and we try to achieve spiritual freedom, spiritual liberation, we have to come back to reality because it's reality that gives substance to our practice, our search for liberation. And so that the basis of equality, freedom is equality, and the basis of equality is morality. And we will discuss how morality in Buddhism is different from morality in religion. And in fact, according to Dr. Ambakar, religion is not it's not based on morality at all. In fact, the two are separate. So it's kind of unique that in Buddhism that we talk about morality, and morality is Buddhism, and Buddhism is morality, and we'll see how that is. And that morality is really needed to keep society together. And lastly, we'll touch to cover Sukhavati, how it is a perfect society. So all this is really preparation for this last item here. Okay. All right. So first is the like Mount Sumeru Buddha, like or a ru, right? A ru shi, like suchness, and this suchness here, according to Sankarasita in his book Wisdom Beyond Words, Tathagatas means suchness or thusness, and it's really is cannot be explained, cannot be expressed, and there because whatever that we experience, whatever we go through, always remains in our experience something that is cannot be described. It's indescribable. And in the end, we can all say it is what it is. Like you drink warm water, a cup of warm water, you can say it's warm, but you cannot truly say how warm it is. You can never describe that experience to another person. So that's what suchness is. It is what it is. You cannot describe it. And the reality is that it cannot be described, can only be experienced. That's why when we practice Buddhism, we can read all the books we want, we can listen to all the lectures, but until we put it into practice, we cannot say that we have understood it, because you have to go through that to really experience that. For example, if you're in a lecture and let's say venerable masters encourage us to be diligent, 精进, right? And you say, yeah, it's a good thing to be diligent. But until you face hardships, you don't know what it means to be diligent. And our master says, well, we should all practice giving wealth. And until you have to go through the struggle of whether to share what you have, your hard-earned money with other people, you don't know what sharing wealth is, right? 布施, you don't know what it means until you go through that experience. Or greed or anger, right? Until you go through that phase where you have to deal with anger, you cannot say that you understand what anger is and how to overcome it. And that's why you have to experience it. That's why in Buddhism, the emphasis is on experiencing. The emphasis is on put into practice and not just to learn and to study. So when we say such as it is or suchness, it doesn't mean that things don't change. it refers to the current existence, current to things that already come to fruition. Right? So we should not understand that when we say it is what it is, doesn't mean that we are frozen and we cannot change. That's not what it means. It is what it is refers to things that have come to fruition. As for future existence, of course, we know that based on the law of conditionality, that things will change according to conditions. Right? So we have two parts of the story here. The first story is that, yes, things have come to fruition. There's nothing that you can do much about it because it is what it is. But that doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to make things better. And that is the future. The future will change according to conditions. So otherwise, this would not be Buddhism. It is determinism, right? Karmic determinism. 宿命论, right? That means whatever has driven that you've done in the past, you cannot change the future. That's not what we're talking about. That is determinism, and that's not Buddhism. So when we describe something as suchness, we need to make sure that we're not saying something that is fixed. That is something. It's not stuff. It's not something. The Tathagata's Rulai is not something. It's a concept, an operational concept. And we can only indicate the suchness of things and not the whatness of things. Does it make sense? Right? So when we talk about suchness, we talk about concept, right? It's not, we have the difference between physical and metaphysical. And so when we say, yes, we all have this Buddhahood in us, it doesn't mean that there's something that exists and that cannot change. Because if we don't put work into it, it will never come to fruition. It only comes to fruition because of conditions. So this suchness is not the Tathagata's Rulai. It's not a stuff. It's not a thing, right? So when we try to communicate our experience, we cannot fully describe it. It's incommunicable. It's incommunicable, right? You cannot describe it. For example, you have this abstractions in your head. When you see a picture, you have a perception of this picture, but you cannot describe what it is. It's impossible to describe what you're seeing. You see a beautiful flower, right? A beautiful flower, but you cannot say, yes, it's a beautiful flower, but what does that mean? Nobody knows except for you, right? When we see something, that's our own perceptions. And it's impossible for other people to experience the exact same thing. And that the reason is because our experience transcends thought and speech. It goes beyond thought and speech. There's no language that can describe what we are experiencing. You see a beautiful sunset, but do you have the words for it? Right? And so the words and the thoughts are inadequate to explain what you're experiencing. And in other words, that is sunyata, 空性. 空性, sunyata is something that cannot be described. And that's what it is. Excuse me. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but you cannot describe it. You cannot fixate it. And so all the teaching of sunyata, according to Shankarsita, is that words and even thoughts are inadequate to explain the nature of reality. Because there's nothing that's fixed that you can say, this is what reality is. It changes. And that's what 空性 is, that you cannot have the words, the thoughts even, to describe what it is. Right? So you alone experience this experience, right? We go through something, we alone, ourselves, will experience it, and nobody can experience the same thing. And but what we experience is different from what bodhisattvas experience. Those who are enlightened, when they experience something, it's not the same thing. So we may be studying sunyata, 空性, but our understanding is completely different from their understanding. what we're experiencing is different from what they're experiencing. And for bodhisattvas, they don't stop at the enlightenment. They continue to grow because that's what sunyata is. It is forever changing, forever developing, forever growing. And for bodhisattvas, their ever-growing progress, their continuity, their irreversibility, 不退转, right? They continue to grow, to develop. And that's because the nature of sunyata, 空性, because of sunyata that allows them to forever grow and change. So same thing too, if we don't have this nature of sunyata, we cannot grow, right? And our understanding, we are mundane beings, understanding sunyata is different from how bodhisattvas understand sunyata, 空性. For example, in the Heart Sutra, 心经, right? Avalokitesvara, bodhisattvas of compassion, right? 自在观世音菩萨, right? Meditating deeply on the perfections of wisdom, saw clearly that the 5 aspects of human existence are sunyata, 无蕴, 都是空, right? And so release him from suffering. So bodhisattvas, because they achieve enlightenment, when they visualize, they contemplate, and they see the nature of sunyata, they are released from all kinds of suffering. And then in the Diamond Sutra, it says here, this is a very famous phrase, right? All conditioned dharmas are like dreams, illusions, bubbles, and shadows, like dew drops and lightning flashes. Contemplate them as such. Right? So for bodhisattvas, enlightened people, enlightened beings, when they see nature, they contemplate emptiness. They contemplate sunyata, 空性, and because of that they are released from all kinds of suffering. But we mundane beings, when we see things as empty and illusions, sufferings are still there. Right? We cannot get away from our own suffering. We try to visualize, yeah, this is empty, this is not true, this is illusion, but yet we still feel the suffering, the pain. Why is that? Why is that when we try to apply, we read the same textbook, supposedly the same Dharma talks that the Buddha gave to bodhisattvas, right, from the scriptures, from the sutras. But yet when we read the sutras, we try to apply this, what's taught in sutra, but yet our suffering still remains. And that's because we pick and choose what we like to see in sutras, and we don't read it in entirety. And this verse here is very famous, and everybody knows that about Diamond Sutra. And probably most people have the impression that this is all what Diamond Sutra is all about. But this is the last part of the Diamond Sutra, 金刚经. This is the last part of Diamond Sutra. We have to read the initial part of how to arrive at this verse. And so let's look at the initial verse of how the Buddha led Subhuti, right? Subhuti, step to step, how to get to this last step of how to visualize emptiness of sunyata and why it is necessary. Here's an excerpt from the Perfections of Wisdom Sutra. At the time, Venerable Subhuti, right, with folded hands, he asked Tathagatas, the Buddha at the time, and of course, first he complimented the Buddha of how the Buddha protects and guides bodhisattvas to enlightenment. And he said that in order for the bodhisattvas to continue, how would they be able to progress and how they can control the thoughts? Because if we cannot maintain our meditative thoughts, then we can be very shaken by the world. and we will not be able to maintain our state of being. And so Subhuti here is asking, how can a bodhisattva, a practitioner, maybe like us, to achieve a state of enlightenment? Right? And that's here. And the Buddha said to Subhuti that, yes, indeed, he's acknowledging that the Tathagatas helps the bodhisattvas. And that he said, I will teach you how those who have set out in the bodhisattva vehicle, Pusat Cheng, should stand, how to progress, and how to control their thoughts. And the Lord said, the Buddha says, someone who has set out in the vehicle of a bodhisattva should produce a thought in this manner. As many beings as there are in the universe of beings, comprehended under the terms being. Of course, there are 4 types, the Buddha explains here. And that the bodhisattva should have commitment to send all those towards nirvana, to help those to migrate to nirvana. In other words, before a bodhisattva can achieve enlightenment, he has to commit himself to helping all sentient beings to achieve a state of no suffering. Right? And so that's the first step right there, is that Buddha is telling Subhuti that in order to achieve enlightenment, in order to be liberated, we have to help others first. We cannot place ourselves first, try to achieve it ourselves, because by doing that, we are not going towards the path of the Bodhi. In other words, we are still pursuing our selfishness, a selfish craving. And because of that, thinking that we are liberated, but we are trapping ourselves when we have that thought of our self-liberation. And so here in this, which is this part that I have not heard much of, but you mostly hear about this verse, right? To visualize everything as illusions. But at the beginning of the sutra, the Buddha is saying, before you even get to this, you should try to help as many people as possible to make the environment around you a happy place, right? So the same thing when we practice Pure Land method, 净土宗, right? When we are Pure Land practitioners, it's not about wishing to migrate to the Western Pure Land and hoping that things will be better there, but we should come back to reality and make this place a happy place, right? So wherever we go, it's a happy place. And so that's the first step that we should do, and that's what this is at the beginning of the sutra, that the Buddha is telling Subhuti that in order to reach enlightenment, in order to be spiritually liberated, that one needs to help others, right? So the traditional progress is that one should first cultivate merits to help sentient beings, to help those around us, to help ourselves, to help our friends and family, to help strangers, to help foes and enemies, and to help as many people as we can. And at the beginning, we should avoid seeing things as illusions and as emptiness. They're not empty. At the beginning, we should not see them as empty, because by doing so, we will lack the motivation to do things. We will not have this push to help us to cultivate merits. And we don't do that, and we don't cultivate merits, and we see things as empty, we will not be able to tell the difference between skillfulness and unskillfulness. And we ourselves are full of unskillfulness. Of course, that will be our tendency. And if we cannot tell the difference between the two, we're likely to fall towards our tendency, which is unskillfulness. And by cultivating merits, by knowing what's good and what's skillful and unskillful, we will have this push to commit ourselves to skillfulness and avoid unskillfulness. And therefore, we will avoid the trap of laziness or complacence, being complacent. 自满, right? We just feel like happy. We feel like we know everything. We don't need to progress. That's complacence. And of course, that will lead to unskillfulness, and that will increase our own unskillfulness. So the first step is to avoid seeing things as illusions and empty, and to work hard in cultivating merits. And then once we have abundance of merits, then now we are qualified to see things as empty. And we need to see things as empty. Otherwise, we become attached to our accomplishments. Like, look at how great I am. Look at how how great merits I have. And when we see things as empty, it's necessary because it helps us to avoid arrogance. And of course, it helps to avoid the trap of the samsara, 轮回, right? 轮回. So the trap of this cycle of life and death. And of course, we continue to help our sentient beings without having the notion of anyone being helped. And that's what emptiness is, that we help others without seeing that we are helping somebody who's needing help. We do it because it's the right thing to do. It's a natural thing to do to help those who are in need of help. And at this point, we are qualified to see things as empty. And we need to see things as empty, otherwise become attached to our accomplishments, to the efforts that we put in. So if we try to skip steps and we jump right into seeing things as empty, 空性, right? Everything is empty, then it will lead to confusion because we don't have the wisdom to understand what's skillful and unskillful. And when we face situations, we don't have enough of a tendency to help us make decisions, because we ourselves are full of unskillfulness. And then when we face something unskillful, when we're being pulled by something that is skillful, we don't know how to handle that gravitational pull. Does it make sense? Doesn't make sense? So in other words, let's say that you are used to certain things, certain environment. And if you are encountering a different environment, it's very difficult to get adjusted. If we ourselves are full with greed, anger, delusion, right? And if we don't do anything to try to overcome it, then that's what we're used to. And when we see something that is very spiritual, it will be very foreign to us. We will not recognize it. And that's why at the beginning step is that we need to try our best to cultivate merits, 修福, to do good things. And then it becomes natural habit. But if we don't have that tendency, for us to all of a sudden to change ourselves, it's not possible. We cannot just one day change to become a good person. We have to, right, slowly change ourselves. It's easier to change slowly and gradually than to try to change ourselves abruptly, immediately. And that's what I mean here is that at the beginning, we need to pave that foundation, create that foundation. It's easier to grow. Just like garden, you all know gardening, right? If you make the soil very good with a lot of nutrients, good soil, the ground, that your flower bed, for example, once you have that foundation set up, it's very easy to grow vegetables or flowers. You just plant and water, and because the soil is rich with nutrients, so it's very easy to grow. But if you just dig up dirt and it's all dry and rocky, it's very difficult to grow because you have to spend a lot of time watering it, fertilizing it, and a lot of efforts need to be put at the same time that you're trying to grow flowers or fruits. Does it make sense? Okay. Okay, so the traditional progress is that we should have this foundation. We should cultivate merits, get ourselves used to cultivating merits, doing skillful things, 善业, right? Do all those skillful things so that we have this momentum, so that it's easier to continue. If we don't have this momentum and we don't have the proper preparation, it's very difficult to maintain progress. And if we see things as empty, we will not have that motivation to continue because everything is empty, and so there is no motivation. And so the traditional progress here is that first, do the best you can, try our best to help others to cultivate merits. But once we have helped somebody, we're making progress, then we should see those things as empty so that we become attached, so that we don't become arrogant. And because otherwise it will cause confusion. We don't know which way to if we're not willing to let go and we want to migrate to the Western Pure Land, it becomes very difficult because you are still being attached and you're being pulled. And so therefore you're stuck in going anywhere. You can't stay in the samsara. You can't stay here and you can't go there because you're stuck, because you are being tied on one end and then you're trying to grab onto the other end. So now you're stuck. You can't go to the Western Pure Land and you can't stay here because you don't want to stay here, but then you cannot go there because you're being tied down. So that's what we should, by practicing gradually, that we try to untie all the knots and to avoid confusion, and to have a strong spiritual foundation. Because what happens is when we encounter challenges and temptations, we will regress if we don't have strong foundation. Right? We want to migrate to the Western Pure Land, we want to take the next step, but we don't want to leave the current step because we're afraid of losing. We have fear of losing. And the reason we have fear of losing because we don't know what's going to happen when we leave it behind. So instead of creating this fear for ourselves, we should secure by understanding what we will have when we leave the current state. Right? Just an example I've given in the past is like when we were children, we play with our toys and we love our toys and we did not want to give up our toys. But now that we are older, we don't play with toys anymore. So we can easily give away our toys to other people, to other kids. In other words, when you have something that you can rely on, you can easily give up something that of less value. Does it make sense? So that's what I'm trying to say here is when we face temptations, the reason that we cannot overcome temptations is because we think we cannot live without them. In other words, we don't have anything to replace those temptations. Those things in our lives, we feel that they are all we have to live. And if we don't have them, we will die and it will be suffering. And so that's why we create this fear of letting go of those temptations. We want to be tempted. We want to have those things, to feel the void of fear in us, the void in us. But when we have something to rely on, we can easily give up those temptations because we have found something that is of more value, right? Of course, there's a parallel path that we should continue, is to cultivate merits and to work for the Dharma without attachment. I'll use basketball as an analogy. Hopefully it makes clear sense. So in basketball, I like basketball. I like to play basketball, but I don't like to watch basketball. I love playing basketball. So in basketball, you're on this rectangular court, and each team has 5 members, right? And they all have different roles. You have the center, you have the 2 forward players, and you have a point guard, and you have a shooting guard. So they all have different roles to play. And and they all work for the team, right, to achieve that victory, to win the game. And then in this team, there's a captain. The captain is simply the most experienced player on the team. And he's not there to tell what his team to do. During the game, he doesn't say, okay, you have the ball, now you run over there, you pass the ball to him, and then he shoots. No, the team will operate autonomously based on the situation at hand. Otherwise, he'll ruin the game, right, if he goes around to tell his team players how to play. So there is a captain, but he just simply the most experienced person on the team. And everybody on the team is very proactive in trying to win the game, right? They want to defend the team, to score the team for the team, and to win for the team. I mean, nobody is saying, well, it's all empty. Winning is empty. Running around is empty, right? I will just sit here and meditate, right? That's not going to help the team to win. And at the same time, nobody is trying to be the leader, right? They all play according to the roles. They're not trying to be the leader. And so if you have the ball and somebody is in a better position to shoot, you pass the ball to that person. Just because you have the ball doesn't mean you have to shoot to score. But if you're being blocked and somebody is open, you should pass the ball onto that person, right? So whoever's in the best position to score, we should pass the ball to that person. Now, not necessarily the captain shooting for the team, right? So it doesn't matter who scores. The most important thing is that the team wins the game, right? With the support of the whole team by virtue of teamwork. So the virtue of teamwork is sunyata, kongxing, right? This teamwork is kongxing, is sunyata, because without the team members, there is no team, right? If nobody's willing to play for the team, then there is no team. So this kongxing, this sunyata is the teamwork. Does it make sense? So we are working for the team, but there is no team because the team is made up of different team members and they have the same goal. Even if they're made up of different team members, but if they don't have the same goal, then there is no teamwork. Everybody's trying to play and score for themselves. I remember a few years ago watching the Olympics. The U.S. team, the U.S. basketball team was probably the most qualified because they made of all superstars players, right? They are well-known, rich, very well-trained, and they were all superstars. But yet, when they played, they lost to, I think it was Brazil basketball team. I mean, they lost to a known team, a team in Brazil. And that was because they were all trying to score the ball themselves. They thought that they would be able to just handle this game by themselves on their own. Because so there was no teamwork. Even though they were made of different team members, but there was no teamwork. Right, so sunyata, this kongxing, this sunyata is like teamwork. That without the team, without the spirit of the team, without the same goal of trying to win, then there's no team. There's no teamwork. All right, if people are willing to support for the team, to work for the team, then yes, there's teamwork. But as long as there's nobody willing to play, to work for the team, then there's no teamwork, and that goes away, right? So what I'm trying to say here is, going back to here, is that when we study the sutra, we should study in its entirety, and that we should understand where we are. When in the sutra, we can't just say, go to the sutra and then read this verse, or even at the Heart Sutra, to visualize everything is empty, and that we don't need to do just visualize. We don't need to do anything, because without that motivation, it's very difficult to progress, right? And so that's while we're here is that we talk about suchness, And that's reality, and that's conditionality. And okay. So does it make sense with on suchness? Does it so the suchness here is that it doesn't there's nothing that's some stuff that you can pinpoint to, but it's a concept. But a concept doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just like the teamwork, you cannot say the teamwork exists or teamwork not exists, because it exists because there are people who are willing to work for the team, to win for the team. But as long as there's no support, then there's no team. But in order for us to win, the team can't just say, oh, everything's empty. They have to work for it. Even though there's no thing that's called teamwork, it's nothing physical. But they work for it because that's the nature of wanting to win. Just like our nature of want to improve to become Buddhas, enlightened beings. That's why we put our efforts towards it. But we should not become attached, and we should observe conditionality, just like the team, right? Whoever has the ball in the best position to win, we throw the ball to them. So whether we are practicing Buddhism or we're living in the world, should not have conflict. Sometimes we have to spend time, meditating. Sometimes we have to spend time living in the world. We have to find that balance, and that is based on conditions. When our friends and family at home need help, we can put down meditations and help them. Right? So it's not that, oh, this is my time, even it's my time to meditate, my time to read sutra, you cannot bother me. Of course, if we try our best, if we can't rearrange, and they really need help, we can simply put it down and then deal with the situations at hand. Like Mr. Chen Huizang, last night, he mentions that Buddhism is to deal the sufferings in the current time, the suffering now, not future suffering, not suffering in the past. So when we have a situation that is urgent, that requires our attention, we should pay attention and deal with it. And that is practicing mindfulness. 正念 is to put our focus, to put our efforts in dealing with the situation at hand. That's what 正念, mindfulness is that whatever that we are focusing on, we are dedicated to solving that problem. Right? It's not that you have this scatter, say, I want to read sutras, I want to 念佛, I want to chant Amitabha, and I don't care about anything else. Then that is not 正念, because we are ignoring the problems at hand. An issue that requires our attention, we should pay attention to it and deal with it, and then we can go back to 念佛, mindfulness of the Buddha, right? So that's suchness. So the lessons that we should learn from suchness here is that before we observe that everything is empty, 空性, we should have the strong foundation. Because you cannot let go of something you don't have. So we need to have something first, then to practice the letting go, because the experience is different, though. To say that I can give out 布施, right, give everything, but you have nothing to give. In saying that, the experience is different when you have something in your hand and you're willing to give out. It's much more powerful and it's more impactful when you have something you can let go. If you have nothing to let go, it's conceptual. It's like pie in the skies. It's not real. We say, yeah, I'll give up all my wealth. Well, you're not giving up anything because you don't have anything to give. But if you have wealth and you have your hard-earned money and somebody needs help, and you're willing to carve out a little bit to help them, that experience is completely different when you just learn about giving. Does it make sense? Yeah. You feel like you're doing something, but you don't want to do it. You just want to. Okay. Okay. It's pointless, right? It's meaningless to do it. Yeah, okay. So you're thinking that you're doing it because and you feel it's pointless in putting energy in doing those things. It's right. So you feel like you have to do it, but then you don't want to do it because it's pointless to put so much effort into it, right? Sometimes when we study, like especially, I see this a lot with like Pure Land, where you want to. It is often told in lectures that yeah, you need to let go, 放下, you know, 眼里, and let go so that you can go elsewhere because that place is much better than this place. I think to me that's just 方便 because it gives us a motivation of something to look forward to, and which is good. But we have to come back to reality and to complete whatever that we have to do. And if we don't like what we do, we can try to complete what we need to do, but we will not be happy because we're putting ourselves in situation to do things that we see pointless. Is that right? So in that case, the reason is because to me, it's like when we are in a situation to do things that we don't like to do, there is no motivation. Because why would you, like pounding sand, you know, like why would you want to do that? It's pointless. I mean, you at the beginning, you can do it, but then you cannot last for a long time because what's the point of doing this? And the reason we lose interest is because we lack that motivation. We just see what's the point of this. But instead of seeing that, we can say, okay, well, I'm doing anyways. You can look at how is it that what you're doing can help you to achieve your goal. Because you look at a glass, you can see glass of water. You can see glass half empty or glass half full, right? And it's the same glass of water, but then if you look at glass half empty, it's kind of very demoralizing. It's not very encouraging. But you say it's half full, then it's more encouraging to look at that way. So the things that we are going through, we have to do, I don't think we should see those as pointless because every experience that we do helps us to prepare for something else. So the mundane things that we do is not mundane. It's not pointless. But there is some value because we cannot get out of it. We have to do it. So it's like a puzzle, like a picture. You know the jigsaw puzzles, the pieces they put together become a puzzle, right? Some pieces are very dark and dull and not very interesting. But it doesn't mean they are unimportant. Because without that, the picture is not complete. So the things that we have to do, very mundane, very pointless, is like tiring. But that piece is important for the overall picture. Because that piece, once you have the overall picture, you feel very relaxed, happy. If you don't have if you have that missing piece, you look at the picture, everything else looks great, but it's not complete. You don't feel happy. You don't feel satisfied. So when we try to achieve, 往生极乐世界, migrate to the Western Pure Land, that is a beautiful picture. But when what we're leaving behind is not complete because we feel unhappy, we feel pointless in doing that. So that is a piece that is missing from the rest of the picture. If we can feel happy in doing those things, at the same time feel happy about migrating to Western Pure Land, then that is a complete picture. Does it make sense? So whatever we do, it's up to us to determine whether we want a complete picture or not. A complete picture is whatever that we do, we feel happy. If we don't feel happy in one thing, but we feel happy in doing something else, like we feel happy in 念佛, chanting Amitabha. We feel happy in going to Dharma assembly, 法会. We feel happy in doing something else, but then we don't feel happy in washing our dishes, for example. We don't feel happy in doing the things we need to do. then it's not a complete picture, right? We have this beautiful picture on this side, but then yet on this corner is missing. The pieces are missing. So when you look overall, we don't have a complete picture. So then we cannot say that it's a beautiful picture. It's beautiful here, but it's not beautiful elsewhere. In other words, if we live our lives and there are times, things that don't make us feel happy, then we are not living to the full picture. We're not making that picture beautiful. Does it make sense? So even though that task is mundane, boring, you feel tired in doing those things, but if it's necessary to do, it's part of our responsibility, and we have to do it anyways. We should put in our motivation, put in energy, and feel happy, positive energy in doing those things. But there's no point in fighting us, because when we're fighting, we are tearing ourselves, we are pulling ourselves in different directions, right? Our body is working the task, but our heart is not in it. So when your heart is not in it, you're being pulled in different directions. Part of you wants to do it, a part of you doesn't want to do it. So you're being pulled, and that is not mindfulness. That is not 正念. When we do that, we are destroying our mindfulness, right? We are destroying our 正念, because we are reinforcing that scatteredness. We continue to reinforce the mind that, oh, we're being disintegrated. Does it make sense? But if you do it and you feel happy about it, and you want to complete it with the best result, then you are reinforcing that mindfulness. Does it make sense? So we used to have to do it anyway, so might as well do it with a light heart. Might as well do it with happiness. Put your whole energy, because that's a practice. So 正念 is mindfulness is not something you sit in a corner. You sit at home in your 佛堂, your meditation hall. That's called 正念. That's called mindfulness. It's not. Mindfulness is do everything that we do, everywhere that we are. So it's not 正念. It's not limited to just at the time when you 念佛, when you chant. But it's everywhere, because otherwise we are two different people living this life. We have a life of 念佛, a life of chanting, and then you have a life of dealing with problems. They're two different people. You're being scattered, you're being pulled in different directions. And when you do that, you are destroying your own mindfulness. You're not reinforcing it. Does it make sense? Right? Does it help? So I think the best thing is, you're going to have to do those tasks anyways. Might as well do it with happiness, do it with joy, do it with commitment, and achieve the best result. To make that picture complete and beautiful. Otherwise, the part of your life will have those missing pieces, because those pieces are not happy and they don't belong to this happy picture. Right? So that means like our picture will always be missing. It can never be complete. Yeah. Sunyata. So sunyata is li, right? It's just a concept. So I'm using like teamwork. You cannot say this is teamwork. Teamwork doesn't exist. It's not physical. You cannot see it. You cannot smell it. You see it when it's there, when everybody comes together. So teamwork is sunyata, because it can exist, but exist based on condition. 有缘, right? 有缘, then it will exist. 没有缘, then it doesn't exist. With conditions, it exists. Without condition, it doesn't exist. Yeah, so I'm using an example. Teamwork, you can think of teamwork like sunyata. 有缘, 有缘, then it will exist. 没有缘, then it doesn't exist. With conditions, it exists. Without condition, it doesn't exist. Yeah, so I'm using an example. Teamwork, you can think of teamwork like sunyata. Does it make sense? Right? So we want our picture to be complete. And migrating to the Western Pure Land is a beautiful picture. But that's only a portion of the picture, because our life is not just about going to Western Pure Land. Our life is here living right now. So that's another piece of the picture. Right? The piece of the picture includes the past, the present, and the future. When we have a thought of wanting to go to the Western Pure Land, we're creating this piece of the picture. Right? Our lives consist of those pieces. And we cannot say the picture is complete and beautiful unless all the pieces are beautiful. So if we still have this struggle, that means somewhere among those pieces, something is not complete. It's not fitting in that picture. So we have to fit in the picture. So if there's struggle, I mean, I'm not saying life should not have struggles. Life should have meaningful struggles. I'm talking about meaningful struggles, not mundane struggles that just tears you apart. Struggles that you work for the Dharma, you volunteer, you put in the effort, you're trying to think of something to make things better. You're given an assignment and you want to do better. That's a good struggle. Not the kind of struggle where I would just want to meditate, I don't want to do anything, and now I'm being pulled to do something. So that's the struggle too, but in that struggle, it's really meaningless because you're struggling against something that you shouldn't have to. Does it make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you cannot maintain it long time. That concentration of energy dissipates very quickly. Right? That happiness, that joy dissipates very quickly. And the reason is because we don't have a strong, we have that because we don't have strong sense of concentration. And the reason we don't have strong sense of concentration because we are not dedicated to it. And the reason that we cannot dedicate ourselves to it because we have lost a purpose, the motivation behind it. In other words, we've lost sense of this big picture. The picture of being Buddha is not just to go to Western Pure Land and be done with it. It's about helping sentient beings and to complete our task perfectly. And if we have a task and people to help and we ignore them, we don't have the heart to do those things, then we're defeating that purpose. We're not preparing ourselves. That's like you want to cook rice, but you don't want to get the rice. There's rice, but you don't want to put the rice in the pot. You don't want to put the water in the pot, but you want to cook rice. But if you know that you want to cook rice, and that's fine, but you just forget about it for now, just put rice in the pot, water in the pot, and turn on the water and the fire. When you do that, you're shifting your focus on putting rice in the pot, water in the pot, and turning on the fire. You don't think about the cooked rice. You just do it, and then eventually you have cooked rice. But you need to have this goal of getting cooked rice. It's not like you don't have any goal and you start doing, then it doesn't. There's no motivation. So when we put rice in the pot, we know why we're doing that. Because we want cooked rice. But we put rice in the pot. Why we put water in the pot, we know exactly why we're doing that. Why we're turning on the fire to cook rice, we know exactly. So when we are doing our task, we know exactly why we're doing this. It's to train ourselves to grow spiritually, to preparing ourselves for helping sentient beings. We want to become Buddhas. That is a very tall order. To become the leader of all sentient beings. How can you become a leader if you have nothing to support, right? Not know how to guide your followers. So it's not easy to become a Buddha. We all say, yeah, I want to become a Buddha, but we don't understand the implication that there's a lot of burden. I mean, there's a tall order. because you have to be very knowledgeable and you have to pick up a lot of slack from a lot of people. You have to provide support. So we want to become Buddhas, we have to ask ourselves why. And then we'll say, okay, the Buddha says, good, you want to become a Buddha? Here's a training manual. Here's a manual. Here's a training ground. Go prepare yourself so that you can become capable. So we're saying we want to become Buddhas, but we are not willing to train ourselves. Then how are we ever going to become Buddhas? We want to cook rice, but we don't want to put in the effort in putting rice in the pot, putting water in the pot, and turning on a fire. Then how are we ever going to have cooked rice, right? So when we say we want to migrate to the Western Pure Land, why? Why do you want to do that? When we say we want to become a Buddha, why do you want to become a Buddha? And do you really want to become a Buddha? Because being a Buddha is to help sentient beings, it's not to help ourselves. So when we say, yes, I want to, then the Buddha will say, okay, here's your training ground. I will help you. Here's the training ground you should be on, right? And then so he will send us help. He'll send us people to test us. Because if we don't have that training, and at the last moment, we are on our own because nobody's going to go with us. You're going to have to make a decision whether to continue to go or to stay back. And if we don't have this training, we haven't had the training to toughen ourselves to see truly, to really want to be what we want to be, we're going to fall back. We're going to fall back to what we know. And so that's why the training is very important. And so when we have this vow, when you and Cheng Fo, right? When we have this vow to become Buddhas, we need to train ourselves to be ready for it. And so all the difficulties, all the challenges that come to us, they are our trainings. Does it make sense? So we should not avoid them. If you avoid them, then you're going to have to retake the training because you're not prepared. So the Buddha is very compassionate, saying, you want to migrate to the Western Pure Land, I will help you. Okay, so here are the things, and along the way you will see these challenges. At the last moment, and if you have experienced isolation, depression, loneliness, you're dying of hunger. Not hunger from food, but hunger for affection, hunger for somebody to care and love us, somebody to be there for us, right? That hunger is even more painful than your stomach is hungry. That hunger for affection, hunger for some friends, hunger for a friend, a shoulder to cry on, that hunger of craving for something to depend on. And at that moment, you wish that you have something to rely on, right? You're hungry for affection. So at the last moment, when we have this decision to make, you will feel hungry. You're more likely to feel hungry for affection, right? The samsara affection. And so the Buddha is training us to make sure that you're on the right path. If you're half foot in, foot out, you're not making a decision, you will be in greater danger than just to commit on one side. At least you have a happy family. But if you're half in, half out, your family is like, are you in or are you out? And then Amida by saying, are you in or are you out? You're stuck in between and you're not getting the full benefits on either side. But if let's say that we don't want to go to Western Pure Land, we want to at least be committed to a family, then at least you have a happy family, a warm family, somebody who's there. Temporarily, they may not be there with you forever, but at least those years you will be happy. But if you're not committed, now you're losing your family as well as you're losing your strength to cross over. So we really have to make a decision what we want to do. And in order to be able to make decisions, you have to go through all these tests. The test of loneliness, the test of happiness, all those tests to figure out what is it that you want to do. What is it that you want to have to achieve? Does it make sense? So all those things are very important. Like all the things that have happened in our lives, we should be grateful for those things. Sometimes we need to be in a happy environment to not become deluded, to not be, be pulled in and lose our vision. And sometimes we have to be in suffering in order to understand that suffering is not forever, that we can still have happiness. And then when we're in happiness, we know that happiness is conditional, it's not forever. So we have to maintain that balance. And in order to maintain the balance, you know that you know not to rely on too much on one and take advantage of happiness or be consumed by suffering. Does it make sense? So is it clear? Is that helping in any ways that when we study sunyata, that it helps us? It's not that to visualize everything as empty, but to know that things exist because of conditions. And that whatever we lack in, we should put in effort. If we lack in merits, if we say that we practice at home and our family members are not very supportive of us practicing Buddhism, for example, then we know that we lack the support. So we should put in effort to heal it. Meaning that we should care for them, care about them. That means that we have been ignoring their needs. We're not fulfilling our roles, our responsibility as a brother, a sister, mother, father, whatever. Because if we provide the support they need and we fulfill our responsibilities, they are more than happy to support us. Right? Because everybody has their goals, everybody has different goals. But we've seen people are supportive of the goals. For example, like friends, when they go on another job, take another job, they're very supportive. They're willing to practice doing the interviews or even to go with the friends to another location to check out the place. So that friend is very supportive of that person. Even though that person has different goals of taking another job, maybe moving out to the state, but because of the care, that person feels grateful and that person wants to support, the friend wants to support that person. So we too, when we have a goal of migrating to the Western Pure Land, we have this goal and we should have the support. And if we don't have the support, we should ask why we don't have the support. Right? If we don't have the support of others, then we're not doing something right. That means that piece, we have this beautiful picture, but that piece is missing. That piece does not fit in the picture yet. And the picture cannot be complete. Right? So although we know that our families could be hindrances, and they shouldn't be. Why should they hinder us to do something great, to become Buddhas, to help sentient beings? Like if you have children, if your children want to go to college, want to become educated, to become, to do something great for society, as a good parent, why would you want to obstruct your child from doing that? Why would you want to destroy your child's future? Right? It doesn't make sense. So if we have this great aspiration to become a Buddha and somebody is obstructing us, that means that we need more tests. That means that we're not really sure yet. We may say that, yes, I want to become a Buddha, but deep in our heart, we probably don't want that. We want to escape that. We want to do whatever. But I'm saying that if we don't have the support, we should ask, why is it that we don't have support? Right? Why is it that people are obstructing us? So we have to figure out why to make that picture complete and beautiful. Right? Does it make sense? So every piece is important. Every experience is important. It helps to make this picture complete. Right? We want to have a complete picture. We want to have a beautiful picture, and all the pieces need to be there. Does it make sense? Right? Okay. Can we move on? Have I said enough? Okay, so that's suchness, right? The Tathagas, Rulai, Nilai, is that we have to find that balance. We know that things exist because of conditions, like teamwork. Somebody needs to put in the effort to have, and the drive to have that team, to put in the teamwork. The teamwork doesn't exist if there's nobody willing to work for the team, right? So that's what's the lesson that we should learn from it. The next lessons here is the Mount Sumeru, right? Like Mount Sumeru Buddha. Mount Sumeru here represents, greatness, majesty. So here's a Mount Sumeru. This is the worldview systems of, I guess, in Buddhist cosmology. Mount Sumeru is in the middle, surrounded by 7 rings of mountains and 7 rings of seas around. There's the suns and the moon revolving around it. And here's Jambudvipa, is in India. It's called India, the location of it. And that's the south side of it. And here's the north side of the island. There's an island on the north side. So this is Jambudvipa means India back then. So this is our world here. And this is the north, the west, and the east. And only, according to this cosmology, only the south has the realms of hell. So I want to go through this, but we are running out of time, and I appreciate the discussion. I think that makes it more interesting, because it makes it, sometimes I explain this and it makes perfect sense in my head, but until I see feedback, I say, oh, that's my weakness, that's my flaw there. I've been going off and off on it, and here people are like wondering what I'm talking about. So I appreciate the feedback, and we should have regular feedback like this to make sure I'm on the right track. And it helps me too, because when I say something, I try to bring my experience into it, and sometimes I realize that I can learn from that experience, because when you go through an experience, you only learn one angle, right? When you deal with a person with anger, or you have anger at that person, it's only one, and you resolve it, it's only one angle. You have to go through different people because they have different personalities, and you realize how to handle your anger in different ways, right? So when I experience something, it makes perfect sense, but until somebody brings a different perspective into the picture, I won't be able to appreciate the full picture, right? So it's good to have the discussions, because everybody's experience is different, just like we just talked about. Whatever that we experience, we cannot fully describe it. So I cannot have the same experience you do. You can only try to convey the message to me, and I try to understand from it. So I appreciate the discussions. It makes the talks more colorful, more beautiful. Okay, so next part here, we have a few minutes. Next part here is the Sumeru is to represent greatness. And of course, the greatness here is the body of Buddha, Dhammakaya, right? The truth body. And the truth here is, of course, reality, and the truth here is conditionality. For example, under the law of conditionality, it says that A being present, B arises. In the absence of B, B does not arise. So this is very famous of a quote, right? A verse, right? For giving you a concrete example, what does it mean? In the Fourth Noble Truth, I'll use a Fourth Noble Truth as an example. In the Fourth Noble Truth, the first truth is that suffering or unsatisfactoriness The second truth is the cause of suffering, or the cause of that unsatisfactoriness, which is craving, right? Selfish craving is the cause of it. And then the third is the cessation of suffering, cessation being the equivalent of nirvana. It's not a state. It's not. The third here, Mr. Chen Huizang explains to us that this is like when you, it's a state of no suffering, but you have realized the solution. You understand why it is, and you have found a way to get there. And then the fourth is the way leading to nirvana. So you know, I finally found a problem, and I also found a way to get there. Right? Just like the example that Mr. Chen used was a clogged drain. Right? Your sink is clogged. It's causing you suffer. Help you to unclog the drain. You feel happy, and they'll clean up. They'll do everything. And when they so the way is actually come, and they go through, they follow through, and they do the work. Right? So the third is that you found a solution, and you found a way to get there. Craving being present, suffering arises. Craving not being present, suffering does not arise. So going back to this, right? A being present, B arises. In the absence of A, B arises. So using the Fourth Noble Truth, craving being present, suffering arises. Craving not being present, suffering does not arise. Does it make sense? So that's a more concrete example using the Four Noble Truths to explain conditionality. Of course, suffering is not physical suffering, but it's referring to mental suffering. And here's an example where the Buddha had the story about the Buddha giving lectures, and then because of his old age, he felt backache. Right, he's sitting for a long time, and so his back started to aching. And then he turned to Sariputta, who happened to be there, and said, "Why don't you take over? My back is killing me." So this illustrated the humanity of the Buddha, not in the sense that the Buddha had human weaknesses in the mental or emotional sense, because he did not, but he had physical weaknesses, because that's the physical aspect of it. So he had an ordinary body, and that body, as he grew older, caused him pain, but it did not cause him suffering. He was not disturbed by it. He recognized that his body was old and that it was hurting him, but he did not suffer from that recognition, right? So Buddhism makes a distinction between physical pain and mental pain. When you gain enlightenment, you no longer experience any mental pain. You're still subject to physical pain. You bear it with equanimity. So what that means is that if you don't study Buddhism, when you encounter pain, you will bear with grudges and anger. Like, why does this happen to me? It's so unfair, right? And even the things, even the situation has already gone and passed, you still have that mental suffering. You still think about it. But when you study Buddhism and you have some sort of enlightenment, your understanding, you endure with understanding. You don't endure with grudges and anger. For example, let's say that your tooth is aching and you need to go to the dentist, and the dentist tells you that you need to extract that root because it's all rotten, it's all bad. That's what is causing you pain. So you endure the pain of the tooth extraction, but you don't punch the dentist in the nose for inflicting you pain, right? Because you understand where that pain is coming from, the source of the pain, and you not only do you not get angry, but at the end you pay hundreds of dollars to that doctor, and you're thanking him for inflicting pain on you, all right? And that is because you have that endurance with understanding, and not that you're suppressing your pain, or you're not suppressing your emotions. So that's endurance with equanimity. Sure, right? You let go. Not let go because you're suppressing it, but let go because you understand it. So with wisdom, you may have pain, but there is no suffering. The pain does not bother you. Right? Your endurance comes from understanding and not oppression of your emotions. So the difficult task that you go through, if you don't understand it, you feel painful, you feel pointless, you feel, a lot of burden, very burdensome. And it may be a simple task, mundane task, but it's causing you a lot of mental suffering because you're being pulled in different directions. When you are concentrated, all your physical and mental energies are flowing in one direction. You are one person. You are happier because your energy is united. But if you are being pulled in different directions, you will deplete your energy. You will be tired. You will feel pointless. You will want to give up because you're drained. Your energy is drained because you are being pulled in different directions by different personalities, right? So when we have wisdom from studying Buddhism, we encounter difficulties and challenges, and we have this endurance. But that bearing, that endurance is not because of oppressing our emotions, but because we have understanding. Does it make sense? Right? Okay. So the basic point here is that craving, not being present, suffering here, of course, mental suffering or avoidable suffering does not arise. So the point here is that suffering comes from craving. Of course, this is not to say that all suffering is the result of craving, because that would be karmic determinism, 宿命论, right? 督民論. So especially physical sufferings are not due to one's previous, those are not due to one's previous unskillful or mental actions. It's not from unskillful mental actions, whether in this life or in previous life, right? So just because you get sick, it doesn't mean that because of your past evil karma. It's not that. It could be because you caught something and your body is prone, our physical body is prone to illness, right? So to avoid suffering is not to seek the 5 desires, right? Because the source of suffering is not due to lack of 5 desires, but the source of suffering is because of selfish craving, right? So like food poisoning, the cause of food poisoning, of that suffering is because you have eaten bad food, not because of your evil karma, not necessarily, right? So living healthy can help reduce illness. Living morally can help to reduce mental suffering, right? So I will stop here for now because I really want, that is the foundation, the preparation for the next level, next topic that I want to discuss, and that is the Sukhavati, 极乐世界, how it is a perfect society. We can review this throughout in our discussions. Sunyata, 空性, is a concept, and that concept is, we should use it to help us to advance and not to demoralize us or to lose the motivation. Because if we don't have the proper understanding of emptiness, we can easily lose our motivation to do anything, because we will see, what's the point? I'm doing this, what's the point? Because we don't see the 空性. When we say what's the point, that means we are defining it, we are saying it exists, that suffering exists. It's not 空性, it's no longer 空性, it's no longer empty. When we say, I'm going to struggle to this, I have to struggle to this, and it's painful, and I hate it, I hate what I'm doing, then it's not 空性, because you are saying it is concrete. It is something that's real that you have to fight. So it helps to step back and say, well, it's not real. It's sunyata, it's empty. But we are feeding it to make it real. So, but before we can say that it's real, we need to have a foundation of merit, right, to help all sentient beings, to make our place a happy place, and not just to run away, because we want to have this beautiful picture. Becoming Buddha is a beautiful picture, right? Helping all sentient beings is a beautiful picture. But if there are things that are still not making us happy, then that piece, those pieces are not fitting within the picture that we want to have, right? So anything that makes us makes us suffer in a meaningless way, then we need to know that those pieces do need help. They need to have work on them to make them beautiful, to make them fit the overall picture. Or does it make sense? Okay. Any other comments? Okay. All right. Let's do merit dedication. Right on time. Okay, you could please join your palms together. We recite. May the merits and virtues accrue today adorn the Buddha Pure Lands, repay 4 types of kindness above, and aid those suffering in the paths below. May those who see and hear of this bring forth the resolve for the Bodhi mind. When this retribution body is complete, together we shall meet in the land of ultimate bliss. Could please rise. We bow to the Buddha 3 times to show our respect. First bow, second bow, and third bow. 阿弥陀佛。